Hello everyone, thank you for the kind introduction. Thanks to the IAB for inviting me to talk here today. My name is Tim, I'm the CMO of a business called Thread. I'll tell you briefly what Thread is. So Thread is a clothes recommendation service, and we're there to help guys find clothes they love. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Thread later, but for most of my presentation, I'm going to talk to you about another character in our story, the hero of our story, this guy. It's this guy, or it's this guy, or it's this guy, or it's this guy. Our hero has a few things our heroes have a few things in common. So our heroes are guys, they're 25 to 55, generally. They have very busy lives. They have busy work lives, they've got family lives, community commitments, creative side projects, they have a lot going on. When it comes to what they wear, they have a really, really simple mission, which is that they want to dress well and they want to feel confident. And we're going to come back to this mission a lot during this presentation. This mission sounds very simple, but is becoming increasingly complicated. And at the end of the presentation, I'm going to explain where Thread comes into this equation. So these are four forces that are acting on our hero as he's trying to achieve this mission. So one is increasing social pressure. I'm going to show you some research we conducted last year about that. The second is that the rules of what men should wear, which were once actually pretty tightly defined, have fallen apart. The second is that our man, as he's trying to achieve his mission, is finding that the high street brick and mortar retail is really not helping very much, for reasons obvious and maybe not so obvious. And lastly, although there are lots of online players springing up to trying to get this guy's dollar, trying to get his pound on clothes shopping, they may not be helping as much as they thought. But let me dig into these in turn. So as I mentioned, we ran a survey of 1,200 men last year, and we asked them about how they perceive their style and about how they perceive pressure on them to dress well. What they told us is that men of their generation are increasingly conscious of how they dress. And they're also telling us that men are under a lot more pressure than they used to be to dress well. So the question is like, well, how does this pressure manifest itself? Like, what do we mean by pressure here? And it gets a little bit deeper, which is that men actually feel they're being judged by their appearance. The women in the audience may not be feeling a huge amount of sympathy here, but this is starting to happen to men now, and there are a lot of good reasons for that, big reasons. You know, we're in an increasingly visual era. There are some of the pressures that have been coming to bear on women for decades are now coming to bear on men. And really what this boils down to for men, and this is one of the most kind of striking responses, is that they believe that dressing well helps you get ahead. So this sort of quite innocuous sounding mission about dressing well, feeling confident, turns out it's actually pretty high stakes. Getting this wrong means maybe you don't get what you want out of life. Okay, let's look at another one of the forces. So rules break down. 20, 30 years ago, if we were all sat here, we might have been dressed a bit more like this. The choices that men had to make in the morning were black, gray, blue. Suit, basically. They wore uniforms for their work life, and they largely wore uniforms outside of work. And that kind of suited men because they had to make less choices. But today, especially in the workplace, those rules are breaking down, and they're breaking down really quickly. This is an email that was sent to all Goldman Sachs staff last year. It is the email announcing the end of their dress code. And it's been happening across lots of industries at lots of different pace. Obviously, the advertising, media, brand, business, this has been going on for decades. Financial services, it's happening now as banks basically try and attract people who don't want to wear suits, but want to go and work at startups where they can be a little bit more themselves in the workplace. This email has one really, really chilling line in it, which I think a lot of men will appreciate, which is this: all of us know what is and what is not appropriate in the workplace. I don't think that's true. So just to recap here, getting ahead in life depends on looking good, on dressing well. The rules are now, you should know what you're supposed to do to achieve that. So again, this really, really simple mission starts to feel a little bit more high stakes, starts to feel a bit more complicated. There's a lot more kind of nuance in what men need to figure out now. Right, back to the forces. So the good news is that I'm in an audience of marketers, people who think very carefully about customers. They listen to customers carefully. We understand what they're telling us, and we create products and services that are there to meet that need. And sure enough, this has been going on for a long time. So, this is what retail looks like. This is what retail looks like that fulfills the mission. It's a shop called Boyd's in Philadelphia. This is a salesman called Bill Boiling helping one of his customers. Bill knows most of his customers quite well. They come in, they tell him about what they're trying to dress for, whether it's a workplace or a big event or just kind of casual off-duty clothes. And Bill actually keeps a notebook for each of his clients so that when they come back, he can suggest things that complement what they already own. But as you've probably guessed, this type of retail is basically the past. And so I learned about Boyd's of Philadelphia through this article, The Last Great Clothing Store in the New York Times. Because this kind of like high-touch, white-glove retail is basically living in the past and certainly not really available on the UK high street. Staff on the high street, they may know a little bit about the product or not in some stores, if we're honest. They certainly don't know their customers very well. So in terms of helping our hero to achieve his mission, he's not going to get much out of the high street. And obviously, that's in the context of the high street going through massive, really punishing changes. And even since I completed these slides, it looks like Arcadia Group may now be in the balance. And it's easy to forget for us sitting in London, in central London, with our incredible range of retail options around us, that millions of people in the UK are losing access to mainstream retailers. So physical retail isn't going to solve our hero's problem. Good news is, fully 20 years ago now, ASOS, Amazon, and other businesses realized that the future was going to be about online retail, and so they started trying to understand this customer and building solutions for them. But as it turns out, this may not quite have gone to plan. So just to take a step back, so we've talked about doing the right thing by the customer, which is where we should start as marketers, but putting the business hat on, like, why should we do that? Okay, the UK menswear industry is worth £15 billion a year. It's a chunky market. To put it into context, when I joined Spotify 5 years ago, the global recorded music industry was worth less than £15 billion a year. So this is a very, very large industry. You can build gigantic businesses off an industry that size, even in a relatively small country like the UK. But again, something's gone wrong. The convenience of online retail is super obvious. You don't have to physically move to get to the shop. Likewise, when you get to the shop, they are very likely to have your size. So there's a ton of reasons why online retail should have fixed this problem. But it actually created a completely unintended consequence, which is this. When I go to ASOS and I type in white shirt, this is what I get, right? This is 200 white shirts. The actual search result is 454 white shirts. And my guy, who is under pressure to dress well, who knows it's important for him to get ahead, who knows that the rules are breaking down a bit, who can't get help on the high street, it's up to him to navigate 454 options. And I'm not picking on ASOS. This is something you'll see online, and it's something you'll see in lots of categories. But when it comes to fashion, when it comes to menswear, it really isn't helping our customer very well. So one thing, just to step out of the flow of the conversation, is to try and figure out, like, how has this happened? How did marketers and very smart business people get from a consumer need of dressing well and feeling confident and end up with 454 white shirts displayed on a screen? So I think one of the things that we maybe underappreciate is that the development of internet online retail coincided with the development of fast fashion. And I won't go into like the full history of fast fashion, but let's take H&M. So H&M in the 1980s, obviously not online, physical only stores. Stores in Sweden, they opened with a simple promise. The promise was new clothes every week. And it was genius, because that meant that people would come back every week to see if there was new stuff that they liked. So it's an incredibly smart tactic for a business trying to drive footfall to physical retail stores. And that worked well in physical retail, but what has happened now is we've taken that model online. So we're putting hundreds, thousands of products online and forcing the consumer to figure out how to wade through it. And actually, what's happening today is maybe even more extreme than that. If you look at a retailer like Boohoo, they have a product development process that I'm told internally is called spray and pray, where they develop lots and lots and lots of new products. They make them in very small volumes, and they put them up on the website to see which ones people click on, which ones people buy. And they will mass manufacture the ones that win, and they will discard the ones that don't. So effectively, our shoppers, our heroes, are involved in this like massive live A/B test of retail. So we're getting to quite an extreme state. Anyway, let's get back to our hero a second. So let's pull it back to the mission again. Very, very simple. Dress well, feel confident. Turns out it's quite high stakes. It turns out there are less rules to go by. Brick and mortar retail isn't helping, and online retail has kind of introduced this new challenge, maybe even made it harder. And I want to step back here. How do we get to a place where retail didn't really understand what our customer wanted and didn't help? And for sure, retailers, including the ones I mentioned, they're very big, very successful businesses. They pander to the need, which is to sell people clothes. It is illegal to be naked. You have to buy clothes. So there are clothes stores that will sell you clothes, and that works fine as a business. But they're not really getting at the mission, and that creates gaps in markets. And what I want to spend a few minutes talking to you about now is this gap and how Thread is planning to fill it. So let's go back to Thread. So Thread, a clothes recommendation service that helps guys find the clothes they'll love. Let's talk a bit about how we achieve that. So fundamentally, we wanted to start with a radically better experience, not just a small iteration and tweak, but something completely different. So a few things to go through that I'll go through in more detail. First of all, when you are browsing Thread, all of the clothes you see are in your size, your budget, and they're the brands that you like. It's fully personalized to you. Secondly, we actually send you recommendations based on what you're interested in. So we'll send you recommendations for the upcoming wedding season. We'll send you recommendations about spring clothes you might be interested in looking at now that the weather is changing. We learn your preferences automatically. So as you browse the site, as you look at products, as you check out new brands, we build the digital equivalent of that Boyd's notebook about each customer that uses our site. We back that up with one of the largest ranges of menswear in the UK, which I'll talk to you about in a second. We also have real human beings, stylists, the Bill Boylings of the world, sitting behind a computer, helping customers with their messages. And this isn't kind of an outsourced customer service to the Philippines. These are real expert stylists sitting in London, helping customers with super detailed requests, whether it's what to wear at a wedding where they don't want to wear a suit, whether it is what to wear now that they've been promoted at work as an engineer at Monzo. Those are real examples, and we get hundreds of them every week. And finally, the service is free. We obviously charge for the clothes, but access to the service is completely free. So let me dive into 4 areas of the Thread experience for those of you who haven't tried it yet. The first thing is we ask people to take a quiz. So we basically get a lot of information out of people up front. Information about the budgets they like to buy clothes in, the brands they're interested in, the styles of clothes they like, and lots of kind of associated lifestyle data. It takes about 40 clicks to complete that registration. When I joined Thread, I said, well, if we reduce the number of clicks, if we reduce the number of questions, surely we'd have more people who end up buying. And as chance had it, they were already running a test on that. And they ran the test, they reduced the number of clicks, and the number of people who bought went down. Because people understand what is happening here. They are giving you information so that you can give them a better service. And when you ask for less information, they have a lot less confidence in the results, as they should do. So that quiz is a really important piece of the Thread user experience. Very, very unusual. Very few retailers would do that. I can't imagine a mainstream UK retailer putting 40 clicks in front of a customer. Second thing to talk about is style ideas. So the stylists create outfits, they create selection cards, they pick out special products that they think are worth knowing about, and we feed those to customers during the week. They're fed through email, through mobile notifications, any way really our customers want to get them. But we're not just selling clothes. We're trying to help people understand their options in clothing, like what fits of jeans they should be thinking about, what new trends they might be interested in. And some customers want the bleeding edge trends, and some customers are a little bit further back and just want to expand their style a little bit. Third, we've got a personalized shop. Seems super weird to be on stage in 2019 talking about personalized shops being different, but the reality is we're one of the only retailers in the market that has a default personalized shop. So when you go on, the products are ranked, and you've got a lot of choice if you want it, but the products are ranked based on the brands, the budgets, the shape that you're interested in. And finally, we've already talked about messaging with stylists, but it's a really critical piece of the puzzle here. Personalization done purely by machines, done purely through collaborative filtering. We know what that looks like. It's Amazon. It's you bought a cat litter tray. Maybe you'd like to buy another cat litter tray. It doesn't feel very human. So the fact that we've got stylists available to take people's messages and to give considered replies is a really important piece of the puzzle. And the good news for us is that customers are really enjoying it. So we've registered 1.2 million customers in the UK. One of the stats we're the most proud of and is the most interesting and maybe unexpected to us is that 25% of our active customers only shop on Thread. So they do all of their menswear shopping in one place, which is extremely unusual in the market. But it's testament to the fact that we've managed to bring a lot of products into one place, and we've made the experience for finding and buying those products incredibly easy. And lastly, on NPS scores, we score well above average for the market. And that's both because we pay attention to things like delivery times and returns that matter a lot for NPS, but also because people value the beginning of the process. It's not just about getting a hold of the clothes. It is about the whole end-to-end process of helping that customer achieve their mission. A really important piece of the puzzle for Thread is what we call style-powered AI. So this is a set of machine learning algorithms, and effectively what we're doing with these algorithms is we are trying to replicate human taste. So the algorithms and the data scientists who build them effectively are trained by our stylists in-house so that the recommendations they make are as close to or better than what a human stylist would make. And interestingly, Thread hasn't always been based on machine learning. In its earliest years, it was entirely using human stylists. And when they decided to try out machine learning, they did a head-to-head test. So they had real human stylists creating outfits and recommendations for clients, and they had the machine learning doing it. And what they found surprised them, which is that the machine learning, even on the first pass, was a lot more accurate. Basically, machine learning is able to take a lot of input, a lot of different concepts into account, and generate recommendations that are far more accurate for customers with their very individual needs. So really what we're trying to do here is scale human quality recommendation to millions. Obviously, the recommendations aren't enough. We actually need the physical product. And there, we have an amazing team in-house that has helped us build a roster of about 300 brands. So we have an incredibly large range of menswear. It ranges from Burton to Burberry. We're the only place you can buy M&S outside of M&S. And we have an awesome number of luxury brands as well. What's interesting about Thread is that it's one of the only places where you might see an outfit consisting of an M&S t-shirt and an APC pair of jeans. And that's based on actual customer insight where we talk to supposed luxury customers who will never spend more than £10 on a t-shirt, but they will never spend less than £200 on a pair of jeans. So we can use detailed customer insight to build truly personalized experiences that you're just never going to get anywhere else. So brands. One of the reasons we love working with the brands we work with is that we have a very different relationship with them than they do with other retailers, and they appreciate that too. One thing we feed back to brands is the choices that customers make, what they compare them to. You don't really get that from other retailers. Other retailers don't really know who you are when you're browsing, so it's very hard for them to share that data. The second is our stylists recommend brands to people every week. They go out to 1.2 million active accounts. So it's a great way for new brands, whether it's Veja or other new brands hitting the market, to reach new audiences without having to spend a lot on marketing. And finally, 94% of people who buy a brand on Thread are buying it for the first time. So we're a really great way to introduce people to new brands. Brands that aren't available on that customer's local high street, brands that customer wouldn't have looked at because they weren't necessarily interested in that category. The ambition here is very simple. It's to create the clothes button on the phone. If I look at Spotify, I can find an individual song, I can find a playlist for a specific event, or I can just get recommendations sent to me through Discover Weekly. And that is the model we're trying to build with Thread. It's an all-in-one app that helps me not just with the buying, but also figuring out what to buy, and also just planning what I should be wearing. So I'm going to close out on this slide talking about what's next for Thread. We have a very original mobile app coming to market very soon. It's actually available now on the App Store, but there are some enhancements coming. It'll be the first fully personalized menswear app in the UK with the recommendations all integrated into it. We're going to the US very soon, and a question that we get from our male clients a lot is when we're launching women's wear, usually because the women that they live with have asked them. So that's what's on the horizon for us. And I guess in closing, I want to say thanks to the IAB for inviting me here. There are 3 takeaways that I'd love you to walk away with. The first is that these hero missions that customers have, they're deceptively complicated. They look very simple when you write them down, but when you explore the pressures on them, they're really deep. The second is that the menswear market, and maybe the markets you operate in, aren't necessarily playing that closely to customers' missions. And that creates opportunities for companies like Thread or other disruptive businesses in the market. And finally, I hope you enjoyed learning about Thread. And if you haven't already, I hope you will join us. So thank you.